after Luigi was arrested for allegedly ending that healthcare CEO's life.
Luigi, that's completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
CNN's favorite useful idiot, Caitlin Collins, took to Twitter to post a link to his legal defense team, which included a link to his fundraiser, to which she quickly deleted. And as the New York Post called her out, reporting she promoted Luigi's defense fund, Collins replied, "That's not true. She just posted that his attorneys created a website, and it's newsworthy. In no way did she share a fundraising link for him. But when you go on that website, right at the top in bold letters, there's a link to contribute to his legal defense fund, where you're literally 2 clicks away from getting to his fundraiser, that apparently has raised nearly $500,000 for a guy charged with murder. This is just a perfect encapsulation of what the mainstream corporate media has become. Caitlin posts a link that links to his defense fund, so she boldly states, "I technically didn't link to that website. I was simply reporting the news." No, she's just playing that stupid game where e-girls hide the link to their paid-for adult content behind a Linktree or Bitly address in their profile. We all know exactly what you're doing, and putting it behind one extra click isn't fooling anybody. But again, that's the modern-day news media in a nutshell. Lazily hiding their lies behind the headlines because they think you're too stupid to notice. But now people are calling for her to be booted from White House press conferences, as her posting this link actually makes her a security risk. But we may not have to wait for that, as the new White House might revoke her access over her stupidity alone.
Which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
But isn't it retaliatory in nature is the argument, because the reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is.
I love the idea of them reminding the press that their access is a privilege, where the public deserves to know what's really going on in DC, so they shouldn't be wasting their time pushing hoaxes and fishing for snarky sound bites. They're free to press the administration over their policies, but not blatantly report lies, especially these same lies repeatedly. And Trump's entire administration echoes this sentiment regarding the press, as leftist journalists cry over Trump limiting the AP's access, saying it goes against free speech, to which Vice President J.D. Vance replies, "There's a difference between giving reporters access to press briefing rooms and jailing people for dissenting views. They're not saying they're gonna shut down the AP, they're simply saying they don't have to give them a seat at the table. As the AP is still free to say whatever they want, we just don't want to waste our time with their nonsense." As let's really listen to CNN's Caitlin Collins.
We are 3 weeks into the second Trump presidency, 3 weeks, and tonight there are warnings that the U.S. is dangerously close to a constitutional crisis. Now, the first shoe on this dropped when a federal judge today said the White House is defying his order to unfreeze billions of dollars in federal aid, marking the first time that we've had a judge expressly accuse the Trump administration of ignoring a court ruling. And in a separate case today, federal employees here in Washington told a judge that the administration was defying another order by not reinstating workers who had been put on leave. Now, this all has prominent Democrats and many of the nation's top constitutional scholars declaring that the U.S. is on the brink of a reckoning.
Which is basically the same thing we would hear from any of the left-wing corporate news outlets.
Close to a constitutional crisis.
Is a constitutional crisis.
A constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis.
A constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis.
In a constitutional crisis.
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 We have a constitutional crisis.
As a constitutional crisis in this
Constitutional crisis.
This is a constitutional crisis.
Nobody wants to jail them over this. We just think we shouldn't be using federal funds to prop up news outlets that do nothing but parrot liberal talking points, which are sometimes literally nothing. As the story of President Trump placing his mugshot in the Oval Office went out, and Caitlin Collins made a video reacting to the story. But actually listen to what she's saying.
Not only have we never had a US president with a mugshot, I'm not sure we've ever had a mugshot hanging outside of the Oval Office before. But that is where President Trump has placed his from when he was indicted in Fulton County, Georgia for his efforts to overturn the election. We learned a few days ago he has a framed cover of the New York Post with his mugshot just outside the Oval Office in what is known as the Outer Oval. Now, we discovered this when he was greeting the Indian Prime Minister. They were seated in chairs in front of the fireplace in the Oval, but just over the shoulder of his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, you could see the president's mugshot there as he has it framed. His aide and person who is his social media guru, really, Dan Scavino, posted a video of it saying, "Happy Valentine's Day" from the beautiful Oval Office. This has really become a rallying cry that Trump has used on the campaign trail. They've even put it on merch and sold it featuring his mugshot, and now it has a home outside the Oval Office as well.
It took her 60 seconds to give you 6 seconds of information. Trump put a mugshot up to remind everybody what they did to him. I didn't need to go to college, get a slot on CNN, or even need the access of a White House correspondent to share that information with you. So cutting off her access to the press room isn't limiting free speech, it's simply just moving on from ineffective journalists. Because let's just take me right now. I'm almost illiterate, but when it comes to this story, if you listen to only CNN's host, you'd believe she absolutely didn't post a link to Luigi's fundraiser to defend him from murder charges. But if you watch some bootleg channel called Decoy Voice, you'd know she posted a website that right at the top had a link to that fundraiser. So people have legitimate reasons for her removal from the White House press room, all while concisely written in haiku in a YouTube video, which sadly is infinitely more useful to the American public than letting Caitlin Collins ask more leading questions, ignoring the response just to come back to her viewers repeating "constitutional crisis" or "danger to democracy," or whatever new bumper sticker slogan the left is telling them to parrot. So if you appreciate my concise, lighthearted commentary on the tragic status that is today's reality, hopefully I've earned your subscription, and maybe you'll want to binge those videos about everything you needed to know about everything you didn't know about.